let's dive into something pretty heavy today.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about manufacturing consent
Yeah.
by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky.
Oh, classic.
At a classic.
Big
It
one.
really makes you think about the media in a different way.
For sure.
Power propaganda, all that.
Still relevant all these years later.
Yeah, and even the title itself, manufacturing consent, kind of scary, right?
It is. It is.
Like, is someone messing with our heads?
Well, it's suggesting that, yes, someone is shaping our opinions.
Right.
And we don't even realize it.
Without us knowing.
Yeah. It's not like there's some evil mastermind
Right.
twirling his mustache.
Right.
But it's more like a system, you know? It's like the way the media is structured, the way it depends on money and powerful sources.
Yeah.
It kind of creates the system where some stories get pushed
Yeah.
and others get ignored.
So it's almost like an unconscious bias.
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody involved thinks they're
Yeah.
being objective, right?
Right.
But the result is this pattern of bias that, you know, shapes what we think is acceptable,
Right.
what we should be worried about, what we shouldn't even question.
So how does this manufacturing actually work? What's the process?
Okay, well, the book breaks it down into 5 filters.
5 filters.
5 filters that shape the media, what gets through to us and how it's presented.
So, like gatekeepers of information.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's go through these filters one by one.
All right.
The first one, it's about how the media is structured.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
its size, who owns it, and profit.
Huge. Media outlets are big businesses.
Exactly. So think about it.
Yeah.
They're owned by corporations.
Yeah.
Wealthy individuals, they have their own interests, their own biases.
Yeah.
And then you've got advertisers.
The money?
Right. That's the lifeblood for a lot of these places.
That's what keeps the lights on, for sure.
Yeah. So chasing those advertising dollars,
Yeah.
it can really affect what gets covered. Well, yeah, because you want to appeal to the people who are going to,
You got to appeal to
the
our
products,
right.
to the right audience. Exactly.
Not necessarily like the most important stories.
And sometimes the most important stories
Yeah.
don't appeal to that demographic.
Right. Right.
So it's a conflict of interest built right in.
So that brings us to filter number 2, advertising as the primary source of income.
Yes.
So it's all about getting those eyeballs, but not always telling the most,
Not necessarily the most crucial.
crucial story.
It can actually lead to self-censorship.
Oh, wow.
You know, media outlets
Yeah.
might avoid topics that could upset advertisers
Right.
or certain viewers, even if
Even if it's important.
really important for us to understand what's going on.
Wow. It's kind of scary because, like, what are we missing then?
Exactly.
So-
Lots of stuff, probably.
All right. Filter number 3.
Sourcing. Where do they get their information from?
Right. Who are they talking to?
Governments and corporations.
They're considered reliable
Official sources.
official sources, right?
All right. But
But they can be biased.
they can be incredibly biased.
Of course, yeah.
So imagine you're a journalist.
Yeah.
You got a deadline.
Tight deadline.
It's way easier to call up the White House press secretary,
Yeah.
get a quote,
Easier than doing your own research.
than it is to track down like an independent expert or
Right.
like go through a bunch of documents.
6 weeks on something, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So relying on these official sources,
Yeah.
it can really narrow our view of the world,
Because you're only getting one side.
one side of the story.
Yeah.
And they used the example of the Gulf of Tonkin incident
Oh, wow.
during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
The media just relied on what the government was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that it was hard to question the narrative,
Right.
which later on
turned out to be
not totally accurate,
wow. So we just accept things as truth.
without realizing, oh, this has been filtered
Filter through a bunch of lenses.
through all these people.
Yeah. Power. All this stuff.
Yeah. Have you ever caught yourself doing that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's so easy to just believe what you see.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to be aware of these filters.
Okay, so let's keep going. Filter number 4,
Frick.
flack. Like a backlash?
Backlash, yeah.
Like,
Think about, like, social media mobs
oh, yeah.
trying to shut down conversations.
Right.
That's flack in action.
So it's like a chilling effect.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it's not direct censorship,
Okay.
but it creates this atmosphere.
Where people don't want to speak up.
You don't want to.
You don't want to get attacked.
You don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
They actually mention organizations like Accuracy in Media.
Okay.
Back when the book was written, they would put pressure on media outlets.
Oh, why?
Accuse them of bias
If they didn't follow.
if they strayed from a certain line.
Oh, wow.
So journalists would self-censor to avoid that.
To avoid that backlash.
Yeah.
That
So it's
one.
like a way to keep the media in check.
Make sure they don't.
Don't rock the boat too much.
Interesting.
Yeah, it can be very effective.
Right.
Threat of lawsuits.
Oh, yeah.
Boycott.
Publicity.
Bad publicity.
It's scary.
You don't want to deal with that.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes you think twice.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right. And filter number 5.
The final filter.
This one's a little tricky.
And-
It's kind of evolved since the book came out.
Okay.
Originally, it was mostly about anti-communism.
Okay. Because of the context of when it was written.
Yeah, like Cold War,
Mm-hmm.
any reporting that seemed sympathetic to communism
Yeah.
or critical of the U.S.,
Yeah.
it got a lot of scrutiny,
Right.
a lot of backlash.
Interesting.
But they say it goes beyond just anti-communism, right? It's about, like,
Like the prevailing
ideologies, the
and keep
beliefs
aside
that we don't really question,
the things we just accept.
the common sense notion.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's like the air we breathe,
Mhm.
you don't notice it till it's gone.
Right, it's just there.
And those unspoken assumptions,
Yeah.
they're used to justify all sorts of stuff.
So the media also kind of perpetuates that.
Oh, yeah, even unconsciously.
Wow.
It's subtle, but it's powerful.
So we've got our 5 filters.
5 filter.
Ownership and profit, advertising, sourcing, flack, and then dominant ideologies.
Yep.
But these things are all connected, right?
Oh, yeah. They don't exist in isolation.
It's not like just one thing.
It's a whole system.
It's a system.
Yeah, they all work together
Wow.
to influence what we see and how we see the world.
That's what makes it so sneaky.
Sneaky.
Like it's not just one thing.
It's a pattern.
It's a pattern, yeah.
Hard to see.
That's why this book, I mean, it was written a while ago.
A while ago.
It's still so relevant.
Oh, it's more relevant now than ever.
Yeah, I think so, especially with
With social media, the internet,
the way things are today.
it's everywhere.
Yeah, you can't just passively consume news anymore.
You can't.
You have to be an active participant.
Yeah.
Questioning what you see,
Thinking for yourself,
getting deeper
it's a lot.
is a lot.
But I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah, this is just the framework.
Like Herman and Chomsky, they go into...
Specific examples. It gets really interesting.
Okay, well, let's dive in.
Let's dive into some of those examples.
Okay.
One of the most striking concepts
Okay.
is this idea of worthy versus unworthy victims.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
It's where we see the human cost of this media bias.
Okay, well, let's get into that next time.
All right, sounds good.
All right, see you then.
See you later.
Welcome back. So we've talked about the propaganda model, right?
Mhm.
Those 5 filters that shape what we see in the media.
Right.
And now we get to the part that I think is the most...
The juicy stuff. Well, yeah, kind of, but also kind of disturbing.
Okay.
It's this concept of worthy versus unworthy victims.
So some victims are more worthy than others?
That's what Herman and Chomsky are arguing.
That's pretty messed up.
Yeah, it's basically saying that the way the media portrays victims,
Yeah.
it depends on political interests.
So, like, whose side are they on?
Well, it's more complicated than that, but yeah.
Okay.
It's like there's a hierarchy of suffering.
A hierarchy of suffering.
Yeah, like some people's suffering matters more.
Wow.
And it often aligns with,
Yeah.
the foreign policy interests of powerful countries.
Like the United States.
Yeah, the U.S. in particular.
So what are some examples of that?
Okay, so they compare these 2 tragic events.
Okay.
The murder of Father Jerzy Popieluszko in Poland,
Okay.
and then the murders of 4 American churchwomen in El Salvador.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And these cases really illustrate this worthy versus unworthy victim thing.
Okay, so tell me about Father Popieluszko.
So he was a Polish priest,
Okay.
very outspoken critic of the communist government,
Right.
and he was abducted and murdered by Polish security forces.
Wow.
This was back in 1984.
Oh,
And his murder became huge news in the West.
really?
Oh, yeah, especially in the U.S.
Front page news.
Front page. For days.
Wow.
Detailed accounts of how brutal it was, the outrage, all of that.
Yeah, it sounds awful.
It was presented as this,
Yeah.
clear-cut case of a totalitarian regime
Crushing dissent.
silencing a brave voice.
Right, right.
And it was horrific, definitely.
Okay, what about the American church women?
So these women were missionaries.
Okay,
They were working with the poor in El Salvador,
okay.
which was in the middle of a really brutal civil war at the time.
Right, a lot of violence.
Yeah, and they were abducted,
Okay.
raped, and murdered by members of the Salvadoran National Guard
Oh my gosh.
in December 1980.
Okay, so another horrific crime.
Absolutely.
But you said the media coverage was different.
It was drastically different.
Okay, how so?
The coverage of the churchwomen was way less prominent,
Really?
way less detailed than Father Populusco's murder.
But they were American citizens.
Exactly, and that's the point.
Okay.
El Salvador was a U.S. client state at the time.
Right.
They were getting tons of military and financial support from the U.S. government.
So criticizing them would be bad for the U.S.?
It wouldn't have looked good.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have fit the narrative that the U.S. was promoting.
Right, we're the good guys helping them out.
Exactly. Challenging that narrative
Yeah.
could have jeopardized U.S. interests in the region.
Interesting. So Father Populusco, murdered by an enemy of the U.S., is worthy?
Yeah.
But the American churchwomen, murdered by, well, allies, are unworthy.
That's the argument.
Wow, okay.
And it gets into how this played out in the media.
Yeah, how so?
Well, the coverage of Father Populusco's murder
Yeah.
really emphasized the brutality, his suffering,
Right.
the evil of the communist system.
Like really demonizing the other side.
Exactly. And it makes sense, right? It's propaganda.
Yeah, but the coverage of the churchwomen was
More muted.
less intense.
Yeah. The details of the torture and murder were often downplayed,
Wow.
and the blame was often shifted to these
To who?
uncontrollable right-wing death squad.
Oh, so not the government.
Not directly.
Wow.
And there wasn't much focus on the U.S. support for the Salvadoran regime.
Which we now know is responsible for.
For a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of human rights abuses.
So two completely different ways of framing it.
Totally different.
One is good versus evil. The other one is like,
Yeah, it's
like we don't know what happened.
It's ambiguous,
Yeah.
Trying to deflect the blame away from the U.S.
So this is all part of the propaganda model.
This is a key part of it.
Okay.
It's about protecting the interests of the powerful.
Even if it means ignoring.
Even if it conflicts with human rights.
Or the truth.
Yeah, or the truth, exactly.
It's kind of scary because, like, how many other stories haven't we heard?
Yeah, how many other victims have been silenced?
Because they didn't fit the narrative.
It's a question worth asking.
It really is.
And it raises another question.
Which is?
How can we become more aware of this?
Right. How can we not be manipulated?
Well, the book suggests that the first step is understanding the propaganda model.
Okay.
How those 5 filters we talked about
Right.
shape what we see.
So once you know how it works...
You can start to see through it.
Okay.
You can be more critical
of the news.
of everything you read and watch.
So we can't just passively consume stuff anymore.
You got to be active.
Question everything.
Question everything. Seek out different perspectives.
You'll just rely on one source.
Right. Look for different viewpoints.
Yeah, look at everything.
Even if they make you uncomfortable.
Okay. It sounds like a lot of work.
It is work.
But if we want to be informed,
It's worth it.
then yeah, we have to put in the effort.
Exactly.
But I do want to say, you know, I don't think Herman and Chomsky are saying that
What do you mean?
that every journalist
Out to get us.
is like deliberately spreading propaganda.
Oh, no. They acknowledge that
Yeah.
a lot of journalists are trying to do good work.
Right. They're trying to find the truth.
The problem is the system.
The system.
Yeah, the structure of the media, its relationship with power.
Yeah.
It creates this environment where bias is almost inevitable.
So it's not about individual bad people.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing is messed up,
It's a structural problem.
which is harder to fix,
Yeah.
right?
Nah, much harder.
So where do we go from here?
Well, they go on to explore how this model
The propaganda model.
plays out in history,
Okay.
especially in the coverage of U.S. foreign policy.
War.
Wars, military interventions, all that.
And that's where we see the really bad consequences.
Yeah, how this manufacturing of consent can lead to really bad things.
Like war and suffering.
Exactly.
And that's what we're going to look at next
In the final part,
of our deep dive.
we'll see how the media can be used to shape public perception
To make us believe things.
and even influence history.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into manufacturing consent.
All right, so we've talked about the model,
Yeah, the propaganda model, those 5 filters,
how it creates this, like,
hierarchy of victims.
yeah, who matters more?
Who's worthy, who's not.
Right, depending on the narrative.
Yeah, and now we're going to see how this model
Yeah,
can actually be used to
legitimize stuff
yeah, to make us believe things that
Yeah.
maybe
that we shouldn't.
we wouldn't normally accept.
Right, like going to war.
Yeah, war. How does the media play a role in that?
Huge role. They argue that the media is really important in shaping how we see these events.
These big, like, world events.
Yeah, especially when it comes to, like,
Mm.
war and foreign intervention.
Yeah.
So they use the example of U.S. involvement in Indochina,
Okay.
Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia.
Right, so that's a whole can
Right.
of worms.
Can of worm.
Yeah, how do they apply the model to that?
Okay, so they point out how the media kind of accepted the idea
Okay.
that the U.S. was defending South Vietnam as a reason for being there.
Even though there was
Even though, yeah, there's evidence of
U.S. aggression.
U.S. aggression, exactly.
And not everyone in South Vietnam wanted them there.
Not everyone, no.
Yeah.
So the narrative was already set, you know?
Yeah, like the U.S. is the good guy.
The good guy.
Fighting communists.
I mean, the commies, got to stop them.
Right, and anything they do is justified.
Yeah, that's the narrative they critique.
Okay.
And they say this narrative was reinforced by...
Oh, so?
By focusing on how cruel the enemy was.
Oh, again.
But downplaying the cost to civilians.
From the U.S.'s actions.
Yeah, like the bombing.
The My Lai massacre, for example.
Exactly, a horrible event.
Awful.
And they say the media, at first...
Downplayed it.
Downplayed it, yeah.
Wow.
And it took investigative journalists...
To bring it out?
Like Seymour Hersh. To bring the full story to light.
Right, but even then it was like...
It was spun as
like a few bad apples.
Yeah, a few bad apples.
Not the whole system.
Not the whole system, exactly.
Right, so it protects the system.
Protecting the image of the U.S.
Yeah, especially when it comes to powerful countries.
Right, and it ties back into that.
Worthy versus unworthy.
The victims.
If the victims are on the enemy side,
yeah,
their suffering is used to justify the violence.
It's like dehumanizing them.
Yeah, make them seem less than human.
Oh, so it's okay to do these things to them.
It's a way to legitimize the violence.
This is really heavy stuff.
It is.
It's making me think about, like, everything I read now.
Right.
You know?
You can't just take things at face value.
Yeah, it's so easy to just fall into that trap.
So easy.
Of believing what you see.
And that's why it's important to be aware of these filters.
Right.
And to actively look for other perspectives.
Not just rely on one source.
Read different stuff. Listen to different podcasts. Challenge your own assumptions.
Yeah, be uncomfortable.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
But it seems important.
If we want to be informed citizens.
Yeah, we have to do it.
And remember, this book, it came out in 1988.
Before the internet.
Before social media.
Right. So do you think...
It's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, like, has it changed the model?
Or has it just made it worse?
Yeah.
I mean, we have more information now.
They do, yeah.
But we also have all these echo chambers.
Filter bubble.
Yeah, where we just see what we want to see.
Right, so maybe it's even more important now.
I think so.
To be critical thinkers.
Yeah, to question everything.
And to understand that there are these forces.
Shaping how we see the world.
That's a good takeaway.
For sure.
So what can we do? How can we be more critical?
Well, understanding the model is a good first step.
Yeah, those 5 filters.
Those 5 filters, they help us see how
power influence the media.
Shape the narratives.
So we have to question everything.
Who owns the media?
Where are they getting their information?
What are their agendas?
And look for alternative perspectives.
Yeah, challenge the dominant narrative.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Even if it makes you think.
It's about expanding our understanding.
Not just reinforcing what we already believe.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to be skeptical.
Yeah.
Question authority, demand evidence.
Those are good things.
Those are the hallmarks of a critical thinker.
Well said. Thanks for taking us through this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Manufacturing consent is...
heavy stuff.
It is. It's a lot to think about.
But it's important.
It's important.
To understand how the world works.
And to think for ourselves.
Yeah, don't let them manufacture your consent.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. That's it for this deep dive.
Yep.
We'll see you next time.